You know, I'm right. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, I'm very excited for our guest today. She actually spoke to my class in college at St. John's a number of years ago, and she continues to do that. And she's continuing to give back here by speaking with us today. And we're going to learn some more about her and her career origins. Joe, I'm very excited for our guest.
Absolutely. She is incredibly accomplished. She's worked as a sideline reporter, an anchor, a studio host. Most notably, you've seen her trolling the sidelines for MSG broadcast for the Knicks. She's done some sideline reporting for college sports on CBS Sports Network. Currently, she's an on-air anchor here at Fox 5 in New York. She's the host of Sports Extra, which airs Sundays on Fox at 10:30 p.m. She's somebody that you and I are certainly pumped to have on. She is the multi-talented, the terrific Tina Cervasio. Tina, welcome. Thank you for joining us with us. How are you today?
Good. That was quite an introduction. I don't know where to go from there. It's going down. I don't know. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. So I wanted to start with this because just a little funny tidbit here. You came to my class and you told this funny story about, the haters that used to get tweets and stuff about. And I just want to make sure I heard this correct when you came. When you were at NESN, somebody tweeted you and said you look like Ryan Howard. Do you remember that at all? The whole class was cracking up on the story.
And it's so funny. So when I was at NESN, there was not Twitter yet.
Oh,
so
okay.
that was 2006 and 2007. So I think it was, I forget where I saw it now, but yeah. I think it was a message board. It must have been a message board. Yeah, I think it was a message board.
The old AOL.
Or it was like a nasty email, but I forget exactly where I saw it. But yeah, somebody said that.
What a comparison.
Like Ryan Howard. Not even close.
Tina is a slugger. She could hit the home runs just like
Ryan
I
know, right? Yeah, it's just the people out there, they just want something to draw attention. It's kind of like, I guess I would equate it today. Oh, I wish I knew where I had seen that. But, when somebody has like no avatar picture or the picture of like their favorite team, like a, Giants helmet. And it's like, Giants fan, 1210. You're hiding. Who are you? So put your face on there. Want to know where, your name, where you live, everything. Then you could say whatever you want.
No doubt about it. So Tina, let's start from the beginning here. Growing up, were you a big sports fan, and when did you decide you wanted to pursue a path in not only journalism, but specifically sports journalism?
I loved watching sports games, whether I was going to a high school football game on a Friday night with my parents when I was a little kid. A lot of my uncles and my parents' cousins were coaches. So that's what we would do on the weekends. We would kind of drive around northern New Jersey to where everyone was coaching, whether it was a crew meet or a softball game, or what else did we coach in our family? Girls basketball, girls high school basketball, wrestling, football, of course. So we just love going to games. So like I said, whether it's, a high school wrestling match or Giants at the old Giant Stadium when I was growing up, love watching sports, love Saturdays, whether it was college basketball or college football in the fall. And, get in trouble for just always like leaving holiday dinners and things like that to go downstairs or elsewhere to watch whatever game was on. So I just always loved watching sports and basically, the big ones. But I also love the Olympics. I was obsessed every 4 years. Whether it was downhill skiing or women's gymnastics. I mean, I just was obsessed with watching the Olympics, following the storylines of the people. And that's what I loved about the Olympics, or like a Super Bowl Sunday, was the storytelling about the athletes, who they were, where they came from, what inspired them to play or participate in this particular sport. And that's where I started leaning towards journalism. And I always, not always, but, I knew early on that I wanted to be involved in journalism, storytelling, whether it was broadcast news or something in that capacity with sports. And when I realized, when I started seeing women doing broadcasts, and Linda Cohn on Sports Center, and Michelle Tafoya, whether she was doing play-by-play for basketball at the time or on the sidelines of games, whoever it may be, Leslie Visser on the sidelines of Monday Night Football. When I started seeing women broadcasting, I'm like, well, wait, I could do broadcasting and storytelling on sports. Well, then perfect job, best job ever created. And that's what I really wanted to do.
We'll certainly talk about you being at Westwood One doing Olympic stuff, which was sort of a big thrill for you. But you go to the University of Maryland. What was your time like there, and what did you do as far as extracurriculars or internships that prepared you and helped you eventually get your first job coming out of college?
Well, as you know, when you're first in college, all those basic skills, whatever the liberal arts, whatever those classes were called, that you had to take early on.
Right.
So I couldn't really get into the sports journalism, sports broadcasting classes. So right away, I went to the campus radio station, and I started out. Everything was kind of taken, so to speak, and they had all their sports broadcasters in place. And I had no experience. I was just like, well, what can I do? I want to be a broadcaster. They told me to come work at the radio station. I took a Sunday night DJ shift. So those were my first experiences on air, Sunday nights. And what I would do is I lived on the floor that I lived on in my all girls dorm my freshman year. There were a lot of female athletes. So I would have them come on, tell me about their games over the weekend, whatever, a Sunday night. So we would get everybody in kind of when everybody's settling back in the dorms. It would force people to turn the radio on. I would always have people call in because, everybody wants to hear themselves. So then their friends would listen. So I just kind of created this whole atmosphere that really was kind of revolving around sports with my show. And so that was my big kind of extracurricular. And then I also joined. So then from that, I ended up becoming the women's soccer team manager because, again, I'm hanging out. These were my friends. They were on my floor. That's who I would watch football games with on Saturday, or I would go watch them play. I'm like, oh, cool. My neighbor plays on the women's soccer team. I'm going to go to the game tonight. So that's how I kind of created my friends and ended up, with that job. So it was great because I got to go to college almost like I was a college athlete, because I wanted to go to a big Division I school. I wanted to watch big Division I college basketball and football, but I couldn't play at that level. I could have gone to Division III track and field. There was a couple places that actually were even offering me scholarship money, but I wanted to go big time to learn more about sports and become a sports broadcaster. So those were kind of things that I did on my own, but I majored in journalism and geared all of my classes toward both broadcast and when there was anything that had to do with sports. And the curriculum now at Maryland is so different. They have a big, new, high-tech, beautiful building at the Merrill School of Journalism. They have the sports broadcasting department. So a lot has changed. So I majored in journalism and then I focused on broadcast news and would always gear my stories towards sports. And then we had to do an independent study our senior year. And it was like a 400 level course. And my independent study was a sports show. So each week I had to hand in a VHS tape at the time of a half-hour sports show. And I called it Terrapin Timeout. And did stories on my friends. And it really, it forced me to work. It forced me to set up an interview with Gary Williams, the head men's basketball coach. It forced me to go to practices and be uncomfortable in situations like that before I had to go out and do it in the real world. If I couldn't do it with my friends and people I knew on campus and in a welcoming atmosphere, how was I going to do it out in the real world? So that's what I did, half-hour sports show. So I've been, that started that when I was 20. I guess that was my senior year. And took 20 more years, but now I have my own half-hour sports show in New York.
Yeah, it seems like Sundays have treated you very well. And
that's a good point. I never even thought of that, Joe.
Any given Sunday.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of your best work has been done on the weekends and on Sundays. How does it feel being one of Maryland's most famous alums? Obviously, Scott Van Pelt does the night on Sports Center. He's probably number one, but
he's
the
number
rest
one.
of them probably very high up there too.
Somebody could probably become president of the United States and Scott Van Pelt would still be number one. As far as somebody that graduated from Maryland. No, Bonnie Bernstein. The whole reason I went to Maryland was because of Connie Chung. I knew that when I had heard that Connie Chung went there and a couple of friends' parents had gone there, I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. she's, broke all these grounds. She was a pioneer as a broadcaster. And that was really before I wanted to hone in on sports. Oh my gosh, there's so many, Tim Kirchin. There are so many broadcasters that went to Maryland. Well, did I mention Bonnie Bernstein? When I was a freshman, she had just graduated and she was already on the sidelines of ESPN college football. So I'm a freshman, or actually I was a sophomore. So it was her second year out. And she came back and talked to my class. And it was just the coolest thing ever because she was out of school for 2 years and she was doing it at the highest level. No, there's so many other famous sports broadcasters and sportscasters and writers that went to Maryland. So I'm still looking up to them, aspiring to be like them. Frank Isola, who is on Yes Network now, long time NBA writer, whether it was the Daily News or the Athletic. Of course, he's on ESPN as well. You know, he fills in and on NBA radio. So he's like all over broadcaster dude now. So I am just still aspiring to be like a lot of them.
So you started your career and we're both from Staten Island. So the Staten Island News Channel, SI 76, which we wish was still around today. And they're broadcasting all the games, all the high school games and some college stuff, and had some weekly shows. Now, when you started off there, from what I've been told, you know, you and our friend Nick Lagakis were doing graphic work and a lot of behind the scenes stuff. I want to know, how did that help you coming from behind the scenes to on camera, especially now when you're doing your own show and at least you know what's going on behind the scenes? Because I always felt in places where I've worked behind the scenes, it always helped when I had worked with a host who knows what's going on in the control room.
Oh, it's huge, Nick. Like you said, I knew what went into building graphics. So, you know, if a graphic is spelled wrong, we have to correct it. We have to make sure our show is perfect. It's a disservice to the person that we're fonting, and it's misinformation to the person that's watching. But it's not going to be end all be all. You know what I mean? It's okay. Okay, next time we don't make that mistake. I'm not going to freak out on somebody because I know the work that goes into it, and there's so many other things going on. So I did camera work. I did, like I said, building graphics. And this is way before the technology that we had today. It was a whole process. Writing, producing, lighting, just so many things. So TV, being the technical director, just switching cameras, doing audio. I did it all at Staten Island Cable. News, sports. I probably did weather. I don't even remember. We did so much, but no, I think it's crucial. I think it's crucial to help with the communication of an entire show, whether somebody's miking you or they're the stage manager. You know, with a team, you don't get on the air without all these little parts working together. So it's so important, and it also makes you, you know, as well, because I produce a lot of our show too on Sunday nights. You know, what else we might need. Can you build a full screen for this? Or asking for certain types of video, or the way something should be edited. When I leave, because now we work remote. I used to love sitting in the edit booth at whether it was MSG or Channel 5 now, working with the editor. I'm not a good editor. I'm not trained in it. That's not my skill. My skill is the journalism, the reporting, the writing. But I love the visual aspect. That's why I went into television. And I can't do that now. So I write all these little notes for my editor. Well, maybe if you want to just dissolve between these things or do flashes between this, and I would suggest something about editing because I used to sit and work with editors. But going back Staten Island Cable, yes, we used to edit. I used to have the, you know, cut tape and stop and cut and place in and insert. So I used to do all that so I can really appreciate the artistry and the creativity behind it. And then they would say, no, I think this would look better. Oh my God, that's fantastic, as the expert. But using those suggestions creates something as well, makes them lean in a certain way. And it just helps whoever's working. So, you know, it's crucial. And that's why I feel like anybody somebody who's say in front of the camera, a reporter, an anchor, I mean, you really should work behind the scenes. So if you're young, and now today, I mean, like I've said, I mean, it's two people that put together Sports Extra on a Sunday. It's the main executive producer, Lou Albanese, and me. And whole show, I'm booking the show, I'm writing the show. He's putting setting up the whole rundown. He does the graphics and all of that stuff. And then we give our stuff to all different editors, whoever is available. So, you know, it's just having that experience from college and right after college of building a show. I'm able to appreciate that. I'm not calling anybody out. I know some people that just know how to be a reporter. I don't know what they would do in these situations if they're like, oh, this is your job, because there's so many other responsibilities. So it's just very helpful, and that's where jobs are going. So instead of having a staff of 12, we have a staff of 2, because you know, budget. That's where, and sports in a news affiliate. It's a very, you know, it's not, we technically don't even have a sports department, because the other person, Jennifer Williams, that does sports, she does news 3 days a week. And then on Saturday and Sunday, she does sports. It's not like a sports department and a sports shooter. So so I know how to do everything to make sure it's kind of all functioning. So, but that's what I would suggest to anyone going to college now or getting some of your first jobs. Don't be disappointed if you don't get an on-air job first. Do whatever you can to get into the industry, because you're going to end up doing that job and 5 other roles and being on air at some point. So it's just the way, the way sports television has found itself these days.
it's a good nugget of advice Nick and I were trying to do here with this show. You mentioned everything. The industry is evolved to the point where you need to be a little more versatile now than you probably did when you first came out of college. Back then, you were working for Staten Island Cable. I think that time period is actually very interesting because as you were still handing out VHS tapes and recording VHS tapes and handling VHS tapes, the digital side of things has gotten a tremendous amount of advancement over the course of the last 15 to 20 years. How has that helped you do what you do?
Just using students as an example alone, it used to take me forever to find an editor, get all my tape. I would walk around with bags. I would have backpacks full of all of my other VHS tapes from shoots, from shows, from stand-ups, from packages I had from wherever I was working. And then we would have to put them all in and load them up to create a 4-minute demo. Now we just download our package. We can splice them all together. There's easy edit programs that we can all download on our phone. We don't even need the computer. I think YouTube is the easiest. I mean, I use YouTube when I need to throw stuff together or make a timeline or just a sequence, say for a team or a player or a high school. Maybe I've done a couple stories and I could just boop, 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 lay them on a timeline together and ship it out. You ship it out, press send rather, and it's there in an instant, or upload and it's right in your Dropbox or whatever form you're using to send large files, your G Drive or your Google Drive. So whatever it may be, it's so much easier today. It's fascinating. You could do it all yourself. You can hire I hired a pro 3-4 years ago now to just make sure my demo reel was just right to get to Channel 5. I was already working there, but when you put it all together, it's much easier. But I mean, we can all do it ourselves now. So that makes that easier. And then also, and I tell everybody, whether it's a kid that's in 7th grade, a senior in high school, or a senior in college, especially in this time, as we're coming out of this pandemic, they're closing sports networks. I mean, the NBC Universal and NBC Sports Channel is getting completely taken down. It's closing completely after this NHL season. So again, there's less jobs, but you create your own job. I mean, all these people are making money on podcasts and their own video casts, and you could do a podcast and a video, on channel all at the same time, like you guys are doing. This was not available.
Right.
I was doing this kind of stuff. So it's fascinating. And you just, if everyone takes advantage of it, and then a station could hire you. Oh my gosh, I love their podcast. We're going to hire them. We're going to migrate their podcast. And oh, by the way, we're going to make you our sportscaster. You just never know. And that's, that's what's so great about this digital, and it doesn't matter where you're doing it, whether it's Instagram. And these days, the pandemic, I mean, we all know all you have to do is watch the news. Everybody's doing stand-ups. I do Good Day New York live from this exact position in the mornings, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, just to keep our numbers down in the studio, just less bodies. And, so the quality is not that great on good TV. So imagine, if you're sending something out, quality is not an issue these days. It's about content, and it's about reaching people and creating a personality that somebody, will just gravitate to and keep coming back to. I want to listen to those guys. Yeah. Nick and Joe, that was interesting. That was fun. You create your audience and their loyalty, and that'll help you, whether it's digitally or on a television program these days.
Yeah, I think it's great how the technology is helping everybody. And 5 to 10 years from now, we'll be having even more stuff we could never even think of. Now, Tina, you're primarily known for anchoring and sideline reporting, but from what I was told from my inside source here was that you did do play-by-play in the Staten Island Cable, and your first game was women's basketball, Notre Dame Academy versus Villa girls basketball. What do you remember from that experience, and what did you think about doing play-by-play?
The PSAL championships. It was so much fun. It's so much preparation. It was so great to have that opportunity. And I just remember how much fun it was. But what I want to make sure it's not left out. I mean, I laid cable and pulled cable from the truck into the gym before I did play-by-play that day. So again, teamwork. Nice. That's how we that's how we started off. So it wasn't all exactly, glamour and play-by-play. No, it's hard. It is so hard. And also television to radio, you have to have that nuance where the pictures really should tell the story. For television. And then when you're on radio, you have to give every single detail, what the color jerseys are, left to right, which way you're going. Well, now I kept screaming. Sorry.
Oh,
All those little details, such as that. So you have to know the difference between calling games on radio and television, off your analyst, of course, when do they like to speak? So it's a lot of work, but it was fun. And that's what I just love about doing live games, whether I'm on the sidelines or doing play-by-play. And I've done like odd play-by-play, such, for example, like for women's gymnastics at the Olympics. And I've done play-by-play for women's hockey at the Olympics. And again, this is for radio, so it's even greater detail. But what was challenging about the hockey, no analyst, and I wasn't doing a live game. I was the highlight. I was calling the game enough so that they could capture a highlight for a goal, for a major save, for a major penalty, describing something that's going on in the game. So that was a weird energy and dynamic. That was a challenge, with knowing you're not live. And we might have some animals making the rain shot right now, but I loved it. It was a lot of fun. And I wish you're not supposed to regret things in life, but I do wish I had done it more. But the opportunities, obviously, when things change with Staten Island and you get other jobs. So, I didn't have that opportunity to do the high school basketball anymore, but I loved it and I wish I did more.
well, let's talk your other jobs, because while you were there, you started doing anchoring work with Westwood One. Eventually, like you mentioned, did the play-by-play for the Olympics, but you also started doing anchoring work for WFAN, which of course at the time and still is the biggest station in New York. How did those opportunities come about for you?
So let's see. Well, WFAN, first I actually I had gone through people and did auditions at Metro Traffic, or it was Metro Traffic at the time. So many of these companies have changed names. It's fascinating. There may have been another name in there, but so yes, I got an audition through somebody, started doing traffic. So I wasn't doing sports. I did traffic in the mornings. And then from there, I just slowly worked my way into somehow finding a way to do sports broadcasts. So then I started on Bloomberg Radio. And then from there, I started filling in on 1010 Wins. And then from there, WFAN said we need another person to fill in. We have an opening. Somebody moved on to this job. Somebody moved into the full-time position on the overnights. I think Spiro Ditas left to do play-by-play, and Jerry Recco might have been the one to move into the overnight. And that's when they might have moved Sweeney Murdy to
The Yankees.
Yankees. Yeah. So I think that whole shift was happening. So a spot opened up and I trained there. That's how I got into WFAN. So it was a whole process of other small stations where everyone's kind of owned and related during that whole conglomerate. I mean, now WFAN's gone through so many different owners since then, but that's how I got on WFAN. And then where else did we say I was doing? Was it the Olympics? Well, that's how I got
Westwood One.
Westwood One. Yes. So that's exactly how I got an Olympics broadcast. So again, everyone's related, similar honors. And from doing the traffic, I did news as well. And then doing the sports kind of in between all of that. I had actually worked in I'm going to age myself now, 1998. I was a runner. So I was an associate producer, production assistant for CBS Sports when they did the Olympics in Nagano, Japan. And I remember seeing the Westwood One radio department. But then when I started doing radio sports updates on the Fan and Berg and 1010 Wins, I asked my boss there at the time, Eric Spitz, who had been at the Fan, and then he came over to Westwood One / Metro Traffic Radio for a while. And he says, yeah, let's get you in some meetings. Let's see what openings they have. Sure enough, they had an opening for women's gymnastics. And, it wasn't really an audition, but just all of the meetings to convince them I had knowledge of, et cetera. And so that's how I got into the Westwood One for Olympics. And that has been a relationship. So that Olympics was in 2004. And that relationship has gone almost 20 years, because this past December 12th, I did sideline for the Army Navy game on Westwood One. And Howie Generoff, who was working for Westwood One back in 2004 when I did my first Olympic Games. I mean, he's the same guy in charge of all of the big college and NFL live broadcasts. So it's those relationships you build. And that's the other thing. You can have all the skills and talent in the world. It is also having a path and the networking, and people bring you along. I needed a lot of work, work on this, try audition for that. You don't get this job, we'll give you this job. Work here behind the scenes, all through people helping me. And those are just ways that you also get jobs down the road too. I mean, relationships that last decades.
Yeah, we have had so many people on, and everybody says the same bits of advice. Usually it's, right place or right time, and it's all about networking. And, I think that's a great lesson for all of our listeners out there. Now, I want to talk about your first major television work, which was with WCBS, doing the weekend sports anchoring and reporter and fill-in. And then from there, how did you make the transition, or the leap rather, up to New England and start working for NESN?
So I was at CBS Sports, well, CBS 2 for a good solid year and a half. And same thing, you get the demo tapes. And then I was able to actually acquire an agent. So I was able to get an agent to represent me. So then they knew there were job openings, and they know what you're interested in, and they know what clients of theirs have what skills and who's qualified for what job. So then when I heard that the NESN Red Sox reporter job, so rewind, I had auditioned for Yes Network and did not get the job. Kim Jones got that job. So then, but like right after that, we're talking same year, getting ready for the same 2006 season. Oh gosh, well, the Red Sox job just opened up. Would you want to go audition there? Sure. It's a major broadcasting job. You have to learn to put the fandom away. I'm from New York. I was a Mets fan. I was a little girl and I just loved watching the Mets beat the Red Sox in the World Series. But you get to a certain point where you have to take these opportunities and not be a fan anymore. And I wasn't a Red Sox hater. I was just like, oh, this is kind of awkward. Person from New York, auditioned for the job and got the job. So, and it was full time. And that's why my agent started looking for jobs for me, because I was working 7 days a week. I was Monday through Friday. I was at Metro Traffic, working the AM shift, which started 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Then I would go back and do another 3 hours from 4 to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then Saturday and Sunday mornings, I was doing morning sports Channel 2. So I would get up at 1:30 in the morning and I would get to work at 2:30, because those shows were on super early because they were before the morning weekend shows. Whew, I guess we went on the air 3:30 to 4:30. They were insanely early. And so I was, I did for almost 2 years. And so my agent was looking for a full-time job so I wouldn't have those wacky hours. And that's how I got the job up in Boston at NESN.
So 2-part question. Number one, did New Englanders embrace you? Did they kind of see through you a little bit? No, you were from New York. Like, they get very, very territorial up there. And number two, much more important question. Do you think you need an agent necessarily in this day and age? Because it's a component that I think is really, really helpful to a lot of people. But we've had people on this show before who kind of made it on their own and found their way without the outside assistance or somebody like an agent to help them out. So what is your opinion on that?
So I'll start with the agent question. You don't need an agent. One of my best friends at Fox 5 does not have an agent, and she worked her way over to Channel 5 as a freelancer a few years back. She's in, they see her work. They eventually had an opening. She said, I want the job. She negotiated her own deal. My agent didn't actually get me the job at Channel 5 or at CBS Sports Network in the sideline reporting, or even NBA radio. Now that I'm thinking about it, those jobs, I had been at Channel 5 filling in for 5 years. 5 years before I started full time. And I had gotten a phone call from the Arena Football League that wanted me to do sideline reporting for the games that were actually on ESPN. And then CBS saw me doing the ESPN game. So they're like, oh, can you do our games? Because I was freelance, so you could work across the board. So I was doing sideline reporting for Arena Football. And that's how I eventually worked my way into CBS. Same situation with Channel 5. But what my agent has done that I would never be able to do, again, it's a skill. Are you a doctor or are you a lawyer? You do different things. I'm the reporter journalist. I could communicate. I could sell myself well. I could market. I could find a job opening. But he does the best job at negotiating, whether it's years or money or just situations where I'm able to do Fox 5 full time and still be able to do CBS Sports Network sideline reporting. He does all that stuff that happens behind the scenes with my bosses, so I don't have to deal with that awkward stuff. And then I just work for them, listen to them, do my assignments, create whatever they're trying to create in a sports show, whatever that case may be. So that's where it's very beneficial having an agent. And then especially when you get the higher levels, which I don't even know what that's like, when you're like the Stephen A stuff and negotiating those kind of deals. I don't know what that is. But in this day and age, and because of the internet and the availability to find out where there's listings and job openings and to just press send, you don't have to have an agent mailing out your VHS tape. It's as simple as an email. Here's my, my resume is attached. Here's the link to my demo reel. And you could do it on your own. So that's the answer about the agent. Going back to the answer about New Englanders, no, at first they did not embrace me. They thought I was a spy for George Steinbrenner at first. I could not convince people I was actually a Mets fan. And then I really was kind of an Orioles fan, but I did not want to tell Boston people that because, the AL East and the Orioles and the Orioles had some good years previously. And I just was like, I was afraid of that, but they just accused me of being a Yankees fan. Now, meanwhile, my husband was a Yankees fan. So it was just it's very difficult my first year. I'll put it at that. Hence the message board where people, the guy was convinced I looked like Ryan Howard. And but then after my first year and the realization that, I was going to be on your TV or we did every game for 162 games. And then with the Red Sox, with a good long postseason and quite frankly, right through that World Series parade in 2007. And they did eventually embrace me. And I still talk to and communicate with a lot of Red Sox fans or New England fans on Twitter today. And there wasn't Twitter then, but then when I popped on Twitter in 2009, people find their way to follow you and all of that. I still, I used to return to Boston and Red Sox games a ton. And a lot of those players were there and coaches, even when Terry Francona moved on, John Farrell was the manager there, and he was the pitching coach when I covered the team. Of course, Alex Cora, now he's back, but he played for the Red Sox when I covered them. So I would go up there a ton. Now we can't attend games, so I don't say anything about the last year, but it's great. And I still love that about New Englanders and still have so many. Two of my best girlfriends are from Boston. So it's that's what I do love about that New England and the texts were rolling in from the unhappy Patriots fans watching Tom Brady go to the Super Bowl again without them now. So those texts were fun to get last night. Watch like the petty Tom Brady people. I'm like, of course they're from New England. No wonder they're saying this. So that was kind of fun to go through last night with my Boston and New England friends. So I hope that answers both your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what Joe is looking for. Now, you make the jump back home, you come back to New York, big job, get the MSG job. First, how did that opportunity come about for you? What was the process like to get that job? And then to tie this in with your sideline reporting or the field reporting with the Red Sox, how did you go about just preparing for a game? And, how was it just like making your way through the clubhouse or the locker room, through training camp, spring training, whatever it may be? How did that work for you on a daily or nightly basis? Because you're so plugged in when it comes to being a sideline reporter for a team for a full season. Yeah,
whether it was the Red Sox or Knicks, there's an element of that I miss where you are so focused on one team only. Now you're focused on their opponents, obviously, but the meat of your broadcast is the information and being the expert on that team and how can you be that insider. And, it took a while initially. Of course, and a baseball team, obviously, it's a bigger roster. That's why I enjoyed basketball. There's just less players on a roster to build relationships with, but it is all about relationships. First, you have to build relationships to get jobs. And then when you get the job, you have to build relationships with the players and the coaches that you're dealing with on the field to get the information to fulfill your job. And it was just a matter and, just like you build relationships in any job, just getting to know people. This is who I am. How are you? This is who you are. Hey, listen, I would love to talk to you on this. And just like you guys, you do your background information, you find nuggets about a person, and then you dig a little deeper, ask them questions, and you find more stories from that. And it's not easy, but when you're around a team every day, they have to get to know you. Because I was airplanes with them as well for both teams. It was the exact same role, just a different sport. And I think that I enjoy covering basketball players more. They're showmen and they're recognizable. I mean, you're talking about 7-foot men on a roster of only, we're I mean, you have 15 guys on the roster, but you know that rotation, you know those top 9 guys in the rotation, everybody knows who they are. So they like it, and they have images to protect and there's a certain ebb and flow to a basketball season. There's shoot around in the morning where I would get stories, and then I would have, that handful of stories before game at night where I would collect a few more, but at least I had those stories. Where baseball, I mean, every day it's a grind, and it's 3 hours in the clubhouse before the game, and it's the same thing. And there were days where the same player would have the game-winning run, or somebody's on a streak and he's 3 for 4 one day and has the game-winning run the next day, or knocks in or extends an inning, or whatever the storyline may be. And I want to interview, and you interviewed me 5 days in a row. Well, dude, for the storyline, or you got on base to create the go-ahead run, or you had this incredible at bat that extended the inning, or whatever the story may be. There's just a grind to baseball, and the players are a little more difficult to deal with in that situation. But then you get your good eggs that were just gems to talk to, like David Ortiz was just amazing. For the big star that he was so fun. And so, yeah, I mean, that's reason to prepare for games. And guys, you're going to laugh. I just have to plug my computer in. Give me not even 5 seconds.
No worries here.
As far as preparing for games, my roles for both were a little bit different, where the way the producers for the Red Sox broadcast had it, a lot of my reports, I led to sound bites. It was almost like a news hit, like I do today for Good Day New York. I get up, here's the story, here's Kevin Durant after the game, or here's new Jets head coach Robert Saleh on this topic, you throw to the sound bite. But I did a lot for the Red Sox. And then every so often you have your injury report, your interview, your quick hit. But a lot of my stuff was built around that. So it was almost like tiny little news packages throughout a game. I would prepare 10 to 15 sound bites, and sometimes 2 would get on in an entire game, because it all depends on what fits in the game. For basketball, it was a combination of, those little nuggets, those stories, matchups, so-and-so, they're facing off against each other tonight. They went to college together, or they grew up in the same town outside of Chicago, or whatever that story may be. So it was little things like that with basketball. And then the straight up basketball stuff. I mean, who's working on their shot, and who did this, and who tweaked their elbow on their jump shot, and, whatever those stories may be. And I just kind of collect those, and somebody's on a streak, and, oh, wow, he just, made, 5 out of his last 6 shots. Well, that's because he's been working with the shooting coach, and this is what changed. This is what he told me. So, same thing. I would go into games with a list of 20 stories for the Knicks, and sometimes you would get a ton in, and sometimes you get 2 in. And then you would be doing other reports throughout the game, whether it's a report on, something the Garden of Dreams is doing, or their special guest, or injuries, or something you see on the opponent's bench. Oh, I'm watching so-and-so talk here, or whatever the case may be. So you have to be over prepared. And the most frustrating thing about sideline reporting, whether it's a college football sideline like I do now, whether it's the Knicks, whether you're working for a team, you go in with all this stuff, and sometimes 1% will get on the air, because just the way the game goes, or the broadcast, some broadcasts have more advertising than others. So the play-by-play announcer has to read more things, or something sponsored, and it takes away from your 10-second hit. So that hit might never make it into a game. So that's the challenge. You have to go in over prepared. And then there's some games where the stuff in, and you walk off that field or that court, and you're like, it's like a win. Like, wow, I had 15 of my 20 reports plus 5 others because I saw this happen on the sideline, or this person got hurt and I had to follow through until they got back on the field, whatever the case may be. So it's a lot of preparation, a lot. It's just like back in high school and college, studying and preparing. And now I'm lucky. I love it. Now I just walk out with my iPad. My iPads I download my game notes. I've even got videos on there. Everything's on there. I will print out something, God forbid, just in case, especially weather when I'm outdoors, when it's cold, those things conk out. So I will print out a sheet of notes, but I love it. I just walk around with that. I go into game notes. I've got live updated stats. It's fantastic now. Did not have that when I was doing the Red Sox in 2006 and 7. I wish I would be able to calculate batting averages and all of that. So yeah, it's a lot of preparation. And then you get a rhythm, you get a routine, what you need. I mean, and when you're with one team, so whether it's Red Sox, Knicks, or for example, Army football, I've been doing the last few years, you do build up a database of incredible information. And then what I would do is update it each game. So then those would just pile on. So you would have all these stories and constantly follow up and update. And same thing. Okay, well, now the Celtics are back in town. What didn't I use? What can I update? What can I follow up on? So that's the benefits of working in that regular role. So just so much. Now it's all on my iPad and in my computers, but I used to have notebooks upon notebooks of stuff.
So you were fortunate. You got to cover the Red Sox in 2007. That's when they won the championship. You've been fortunate with MSG over the course of the last decade here, being a sideline reporter for the Knicks, for the Red Bulls, and then being a studio host for the Red Bulls. So you've got to see some winning teams, but the Knicks not so much. They had that one really good season back in 2012, and that seems to be it.
I covered the team.
But,
54 wins.
but watching you through the years, it was very evident that you always had this abundance, energy, and it really shined through the TV screen. And so for other reporters out there, especially those who are covering a team like the Knicks, who maybe have not been as fortunate, a lot of losing seasons, maybe the energy of the players and the interviews that they do, maybe it's not fully there. I'm sure you've experienced stuff like that. How do you keep your energy level up? How do you raise that so that it makes your job much more effective and it shows through the TV screen?
Well, I'm a fan too. And it comes back to that. And I know earlier I'm kind of contradicting myself. I was like, you have to put that aside when you go work for certain teams in different markets and teams you haven't cheered for. But I'm a fan of sports, and I'm a fan of watching athletes succeed and their background stories. So even if a team, I always go back to this story. It was my first season covering the Knicks. It was 2008, 2009 season. It was the last home game, and I think they were going for their 23rd win. And now, the Knicks have the advantage, of course, of MSG and Madison Square Garden, and that place is packed. But everybody says, oh, it's celebrity and it's corporate paying, because they have the money to get in. But no, it's not just them, because you have real fans that spend their good hard-earned money to go see the Knicks when we can go to games. And those are they're cheering. I mean, you're not going to get corporate people or tourists or celebrities. I mean, if it's that many of them, these are real fans cheering like crazy, because this team had 20 wins. They were at the playoffs going back to like February 28th. And this place was so loud as the team was trying to, win down the stretch and overcome, some, a late rally. I forget. It was like Detroit or Miami. It wasn't Miami, but I think it was like Orlando or somebody. But to get that last win of the season, and it was like watching a finals game. And I had been to finals games in the NBA, and it was that loud. And that is what I feel like my responsibility covering a team, especially when you're attached to a team. You want to bring them as much information as possible. You want to bring them as much unique information from the access you have to players and coaches, because you're right there in the trenches with them. But it's sports, it's entertainment. These are good things. Even if a guy is 2 for 12 from, the field, they're, he's still playing for your team. This is what he's trying to do to get better at it. Or this is like a really good story about his life. So you can't hate on him that much. Like, that's kind of my angle on it. So that's one thing I struggle with when sometimes I do NBA radio. I can only be so hard on a player, because I've lived and traveled with these players for so many years. I could see that other side. Like, there's a reason behind the struggle. If, is he not playing in the right system? Is there an injury that's affecting that? Did they tweak something, whether it's his at bat or if it's the way he's, shooting from the outside or whatever that the case may be? There's a story behind everything, even if it's bad. And I could find that story, and I'm excited to tell that story, because it gives you an answer to what you might be calling up and screaming at the fan why so-and-so should be traded or cut or how they resign him. So, it's all those things that excite me, that I could bring that to the table. And I'm just an excitable person. It's and it's been my detriment. I've not gotten jobs because I'm too hyper and I talk too fast. That's the kind. So it's it's a blessing and a curse in and of itself.
You're a true New Yorker, Tina. So
and I'm working where I should be. And that was the thing. I was applying for jobs when I was coming out of college. I was always told, you're too New York, and I'm thinking, gosh, I wish I'd get a job in New York City, in your little city. To be honest with you. I'm from New Jersey. I get it, but come on, I grew up 6 miles from the Hudson River.
Right.
So yeah, so that's, I mean, and that's who I am. And that's what I sort of learned through my experience and my journey up in Boston too. I was trying to be somebody that I wasn't sometimes, to make the fans happier when I would see those awful message boards, and I would change things, whether it was my delivery, what I was wearing. And it was Jerry Remy, long time Red Sox, great second baseman, still broadcasting through 5 bouts of cancer. That man keeps beating it just so he could broadcast Red Sox games. He said, Tina, you need to be yourself. You need to be yourself. Who is that? It is somebody that talks with their hands and talks a little fast. He's like, it's okay, you're from New York. People are from New York. A lot of these players are from New York. A lot of these players are going to leave the Red Sox and go play for the Yankees and beat the Red Sox. And he said that to me, and he says, so try to be yourself. And I did, and it made my job easier. It made people like me and embrace me better my second year around. And then I started getting the jobs that I wanted, where in New York. Oh, and that was a question you guys had asked me about the MSG job. How did I end up there?
Yes.
So that was an advantage of having an agent. I had always put in my ear, look, this is a great job covering the Red Sox, and I just got a World Series ring, but I do want to work in New York. That's where my family is. That's where I'm comfortable. I think I could be more embraced for being myself in the New York market. So they had their ear, open, listening for that, what roles I would fill in. And sure enough, there was a role at MSG. Same thing. You bring your tape. I think we were on discs by then. We were on CDs by the time I got to MSG. You bring over your CD and or jump drive. Those were starting. You have your file on there. Did a little bit of an audition, a little bit of an interview, and that's how I got my job there. That happened pretty fast because they had seen me in the market at Channel 2. So the people that were hiring at MSG knew who I was from that market, as well as being just up on NESN, everybody. And that was all, now we're getting sports packages and everybody's on satellite. So it wasn't as much as like, oh, who's this person? It was, oh, we know Tina, bring her in for a conversation. So that's how the MSG thing happened. And once that offer came across the table, even after the Red Sox winning that year, it was pretty easy to say yes. My husband was living in our new house in New Jersey. We just got married. I was living up in a studio apartment in Boston. It was a big sacrifice, but it was for my career. It was the best thing I ever did. And it opened up the opportunity to go to MSG, work at home, work in the number one market and the market I grew up with the teams that I grew up watching.
Yeah, and since then, you mentioned roles. I said at the top you were multi-talented, but you could literally, you're going to need like a huge like CVS type receipt list for all the stuff that you do. NBA TV reporter, you worked at the Big Ten Network for a few years. You mentioned at the top you worked college sports, you for CBS Sports Network. You're doing a lot. You're doing a lot at once over the course of the last 10 years, and we're going to get you to your time at Fox in a little bit. But I just wanted to ask you, how hard is it through the years being able to juggle the responsibility of different roles? How did you balance having multiple jobs at once with your personal life? You just mentioned that you got married, moved back here with your husband. So what was it like trying to balance that? What was your mindset doing all that? And for some people, if you're doing so many things at once, a lot of people could be overwhelmed. It seems like with your high energy level, it only, just drives you to succeed and make all those different roles even better. So what was your mindset and how were you able to balance all that?
I don't even know what balance is. I would not say that I'm balancing any of it. And there are still times where I get overwhelmed. Especially this past year, I had some really crazy, intense weeks where I was piling on stories at Channel 5 and then trying to get ready for the Army Navy, where I worked for 2 places in one day, where I did pregame on CBS Sports Network and then did the game on Westwood One. So I was on-field host, interviewer for CBS, and then sideline reporter for Westwood One. That was one of the craziest weeks of my entire life this past December, but it was rewarding because I was also doing I had finally gotten my hands on some great stories with the Giants and out in the field, whether it was Zoom or in the field with former Willie Colon. I did a great story with him that week. So it's overwhelming, but you love it. My biggest, and people, and I got yelled at a lot for this by doctors and friends and all this. There's days where I sleep, 3 hours a night, 5 consecutive nights, and you're supposed to sleep like 8 hours. And I'm like, oh, I think I slept 8 hours last week. Not good. I got sick last week. It wasn't COVID, but I got regular sick because I wasn't sleeping a lot. So, there's things like that. People think you're crazy. Some people can't handle it. I can handle it. A lot of sacrifices. My husband and I lived apart for 2 years, and we were newly married. We were only married for 1 year. I'm like, I'm getting an apartment in Boston to go to my new job. So that was that. But then I was able to come home, thank goodness. We don't have kids. And there's good things and bad things to that. That was a choice we made. And it's, I did it for my job because there's just like no time to me. And then, well, how do you get a job in Boston and live up there when your husband has your house in New Jersey? And how do you travel for 5, 6, 7, 14 days straight? I know women that have done that with children. It just wasn't something that I wanted to do. I either wanted to, you're a mother or you're a sportscaster. That was a type of job I couldn't imagine balancing with all the travel. And I really just wanted to do this and take whatever jobs I get. And, there's been opportunities, especially with the pandemic, where certain people couldn't travel or go somewhere because of their family situation. And Tina, are you available? Yes. So it's open doors, so it's like a weird situation because everybody's personal situation is very different, and you have to do what's best for yourself. And then you also just can only do what opportunities present themselves to you well. And so it's just a weird thing, but there has been a lot of sacrifice, and I enjoy my work that much that I do, I get energy, I pop out of bed. Okay, we've got a shoot, we've got live shots at Yankee Stadium. It's opening day. You're up at 3 a.m. I, get there and I stay for the game until 9 o'clock at night. It's not healthy, but I do it because of the passion for the job, and it doesn't feel like work. It really doesn't when you're, even if, there's a crazy things you have to do, like driving or, even working at home. It's not easy working at home because I'm just working off my laptop, not some fancy television station computer that flies. Like yesterday I was at the station. I was like, look at this screen and it works so fast. And that happened. I could just scan through this. Every hour of work I do at the station, it takes me like 2.5 hours at home, just I'm logging into my station computer. So it's a lot of hours. People think, oh, you had 3 hits today. That's 9 minutes on air. Well, it's like 12 hours of work to create those 9 minutes on air. And I'm lucky because we have Good Day New York is like 4 hours long. There's sometimes where I'm on twice an hour for, when there's a big story, when there's a big trade. Forget it. The big 3, the Harden trade, I was on they're like, hey, can you pop on again and explain why this is a big story? Because some people just, aren't sports fans, but they know this is big news. So let me explain why. I love doing that stuff. So, and I'm lucky because Good Day, like I said, is 4 hours. So I get an opportunity to sometimes be on air 6 minutes an hour, where sometimes a local sports affiliate as a sports anchor, you're on twice a night for 3 minutes. The whole day. So I'm really lucky with what Fox does with their shows and to have those opportunities. And as far as juggling the different roles, that was a lot of it was because of my shortcomings. So I couldn't get a job here. I was able to get a job in traffic radio. So I was able to learn the skills of being a radio broadcaster. And then I started doing sports radio. Then, the play-by-play was, an opportunity because that was available at Staten Island Cable. Oh, I get to be on the air. I'll call a girls, high school, college, basketball game. High school basketball game, of course. Just what are the available jobs that I can get? I just wanted to get a job. So whether it was reporting, sideline reporting, I always wanted to be a sideline reporter. But you need a full-time job. You need an extra job because that full-time job doesn't pay a lot, or you want to do more. You have the opportunity to do more. That's what I want to do now. I have a great full-time job, but I still want to be on the sideline. So let's do CBS, and then other jobs come from that. So that's just been a product. At first, it was because of my shortcomings. I picked up jobs just to get on air, just to work in sports. But then I developed those skills, and I've been able to do them as real jobs throughout the rest of my career.
Well, let's talk Fox 5. Obviously, you were there part-time for many years. I want to know how the opportunity came about for you to get the full-time role. Obviously, Duke Castiglione, he goes home, he goes back to Boston, and many people know is his famous father, who was a Red Sox great. But how did that come about for you? Did he say, hey, I'm leaving, maybe you want to go for this? Or did somebody come to you, or did you go to them? Yeah.
Duke gave me the word because at the time I was freelancing. So at that time I was freelancing at MSG doing the Red Bulls. I was on NBA radio. I hosted the weekend morning shows, NBA Weekend on Saturdays and Sundays, 7 to 10. So I was doing that regularly. I was doing the Red Bulls, during their season from April through October. I was filling in at Channel 5. Oh, and at the time I was doing Big Ten sideline for college football. So that I was doing then, and then I was doing other things. Like I would fill in on MLB radio. I would do projects for stuff at Sirius XM. I would fill in for the Mad Men. Oh my God, the Morning Men. So I was doing a lot of radio stuff. So it wasn't just specifically NBA radio. So I was freelancing a ton at Sirius XM and those other on-air jobs. Oh, and I was doing the sideline reporting. Actually, no, Big Ten is already done because then I started CBS. So 2008, 17, I'm at CBS doing, originally it was arena football, then it grew to college basketball, then it was college basketball, college football. So I'm all over the place. And Duke's like, look, I don't know if you want to leave all that aside because this is a full-time job. This is a full commitment, but I'm going to do news in Boston. So the job's open. So of course, you know what I mean? You always apply for a full-time job in the market where you work, where you're already working and filling in. I mean, I practically felt like I was working there full-time anyway. I would fill in for Duke for 5 days and work almost every single weekend filling in or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's the same thing. You go to this director. I heard Duke's leaving. I'm interested in the job. What do you need from me? They basically needed nothing from me. They're like, we'll do meetings because I didn't need a demo tape. I was working the next night, so my work. And it's that process. And it was a lot of interviews because it was a big role. So meeting with the news director, the assistant news director, of course, the general manager, met with the executive director of Good Day. And they knew me. They've known me for years. I was filling in on their shows, but now they get to hear my views and what I wanted from this role and what I would do different and what I could bring to the table. So there's a managerial element to this role as well, because then there's days that I'm off, I'm still working. I mean, I feel like every trade happens or, Hank Aaron dies the day I'm off. So immediately, what do you need from me? I call the news desk. Oh, we might need some contacts. Who do we interview? Okay, Ken Singleton, this one, that one. I just, kind of give out a bunch of phone numbers. I text them for, hey guys, it's Tina. Obviously we want to talk about Hank Aaron's passing. It's not me. I'm off today. Would you talk to this reporter? Oh, sure. So you find yourself working for 2 hours on your day off. And that's what they wanted to make sure that I was willing to do, at Channel 5. So it was a lot. It was the biggest interview process I went through. There were a lot of interviews and it was nerve-wracking. It was very different because it had that managerial element to it to be able to delegate and make sure stories got on the air when I wasn't there. Or if I was doing a story, I had a story, and the pandemic is a whole nother challenge. I had a story booked, this high-tech training where you could do virtual coaching. Like, we live in the Jetsons now, I'm convinced. This is what we were watching when we were watching the Jetsons. So I'm doing this whole story and it had to be planned a certain day when the store was closed. So I could go in with the masks and the whole protocol. And, that's the day that they have the Francisco Lindor press conference. I'm like, really? So I've got like the Francisco Lindor press conference on my phone in the corner while we're setting up the shoot over here. And those were those were situations like that I would be willing to do. Like, well, this is a unique story that Fox wants me to do. Everybody could, you could watch the Francisco Lindor press conference on 85 channels. I'm going to do that as well. What else can I bring different to the table when there is a big signing or a big trade or a big player? What else can I do different that the other channels might not have? And that day it was that high-tech virtual coaching story. So that's kind of what I had to fit in to get that job at Channel 5.
Tina, who are your favorite people to interview and who are your go-to guests that are versed utility men, so to say, for Sports Extra?
I try not to have too many. I want to have so many different guests. So I try not to keep relying on people. But I've noticed that a lot of my guests, my 3 years, have been broadcasters that I've come up with, such as Maggie Gray, who's on WFAN, and Mark Alusis, Moose and Maggie. We all started, I started at the Fan with Moose. Moose was producing. I was going to do updates. Moose started hosting shows. I had done overnight shows with Moose hosting, and I was the update anchor. So we kind of came up through the industry together. Maggie was a production assistant at the Olympics in 2004 for Westwood One. That's how we got to know each other. She cut it was cutting tape in 2004. She would cut my tape for me, my sound bites, would grab my highlights from whatever gold medal I was calling for the all around, if Carly Patterson won the all around, or somebody won this, and she would cut my highlights, put them into our folders, our virtual folders for the sports update. Here's Tina Cervasio with the call. Maggie produced that. So I found that it's a lot of broadcasters that I've come up in the industry with. You can't
go wrong with the Moose. We had Moose on our show.
Oh yeah.
And it's impossible to not find him on TV or the radio. Like you have to try not to find him because he's on everything.
He's on every day and every day. Sunday when I'm driving to work, and in the afternoons, the middays here when I'm home, he's always on. So that's who I feel like I keep going back to, and it's a lot of the broadcasters, that I worked with, like Mike Breen, and I had that opportunity, to call him up, and of course, whether it's Alan Hahn, Wally Zerbiak, all the guys I've worked with at MSG. Rebecca was a great host this summer because she had just come home from the bubble, so I was like, oh my God, I have got to have you on. What the heck was that like? She was a great guest. So it's just like all my contacts through, being a broadcaster. But also I have a very big guest on Sports Action next week. So I guess I'll break it to you guys. I always get nervous because I haven't done, it's until it's like on the air, because obviously we're not live with my guests at 10:30. It's an odd hour. Sometimes I go live with a writer though. Like if it's a major event and there's a writer at a game or something like that, I'll go live with them. That's because they're still working and they're available and they're in work mode. But that's head coach Steve Nash will be on Sports Extra next week.
There you go.
And but I've been a fan, not a fan. I actually did not like Steve Nash because his Santa Clara team beat Maryland and eliminated them from the tournament back in '96. So, or was it 97 or 95? Oh my God, I just got real old for a second there. I'm just a little tired. But that's where I first saw Steve Nash play basketball. Followed his career, was always a huge fan. He was such a great interview. Oh my gosh. And I had been introduced to him. I had actually, I guess it was the whole D'Antoni thing. Obviously, the minute the Knicks played the Suns and, you're playing against Steve Nash and you've read 7 seconds or less twice. That was, you grab Steve Nash, because it's all, because the Knicks lost a lot that first year. So, the Suns won. So, we're going to talk to Steve Nash about Mike D'Antoni and Amari Stoudemire. So, it's so fun to have those three together. And now at the Nets, I just love that whole storyline. And so they're kind of like go-to because I've known those three for so long. And that's what it becomes. It just becomes the relationships you build. A lot of former Giants players, I never thought I would have like their phone numbers in my phone because they're broadcasters now, or they're contributors to the Giants broadcast, or just doing stuff for the organization. So I've emceed a John Starks charity golf tournament. I mean, I used to remember, watching John Starks dunk over Michael Jordan or be that crazy feisty guard for the Knicks in the 90s. And, that gnat, and he'd be like annoying to other teams. Like, I'm at his charity golf event, like welcoming people to it. So, so it's just so cool to have those resources, kind of people that, I watched growing up. And then as I was coming up through the industry, they were transitioning out of being athletes. So those are always great guests, because they love promoting whatever's going on, but then they're going to talk about their team. They're going to talk about the biggest news in the NBA and NFL. So those are kind of like my two people. I was really excited today. I did a story this year on Nate Ebner, who safety for the Giants, special teams captain,
U.S.
former Patriot, a Joe Judge disciple that he brought over, and he announced his book. And the book is basically a really deeply personal book about his father who was murdered, but about that bond that they built in the 19 years that Nate had his father in his life. And that I really interviewed Nate. I don't know how. It's like I knew that story had happened because they told it so many times, heading to Super Bowl games, because the Patriots were always in the Super Bowl. But I didn't know the whole rugby connection. And then I was like, I want to talk to Nate Ebner about playing rugby because I knew he had gone to the Olympics. And like, oh my God, this is Nate Ebner with a dad, that whole story. So I was able to do that story this year. And he was such a great interview. I want to do like a rugby show with him. Like, that's it. I want to do like our special on rugby with Nate Ebner because he loved talking about it. And he was so excited to break down the differences between football and rugby and the nuances and what translated, what translates and what doesn't. And it was just the coolest interview. And we were supposed to talk for 8 minutes and we were on for like 48 minutes on Zoom. And I'm going to get all that good stuff in, but I'm saving it for something. I'm going to do something on the road on rugby, when there's like a slow day.
I think we got to do sports extra.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I guess. So that was like an exciting interview. There's just amazing people like that. And you get them on teams. There's some great interviews. I'll tell you what, Sam Darnold, I mean, through all that the kid's been through this past season, anytime I did several one-on-ones with him this year because we did a pregame show for the Jets. He was great. I mean, he's just, answers the questions. He's trying, so he's very accessible and cooperative. That is always, Saquon, my God. I spent time with him the other day on Zoom. He was just on the show this past Sunday. He's fun to interview. He's very focused at first, talking about, a little cliche with his rehabilitation and stuff he says about Daniel Jones. But then you might he was really funny and we didn't get to use it because the Packers lost. But it's fun getting out of him who he's going to the Super Bowl. So I'm outing Saquon to pick the Packers to go and win. And but the way he talked about the quarterbacks was really cool to see that side of Saquon. He's like, I love Tom. He's to hear, a player in the NFL that you're supposed to try to beat the Bucks. He's the GOAT. You hear him talk about Brady, but man, it's A-Rod's time. And he knows all this stuff because he's talking so much about NFC and the Packers because obviously he's played them so much. And this was like first and Saquon didn't get to play. It's not that he again, he doesn't go head to head with Tom Brady, but obviously. So it was neat to hear him talk about the quarterbacks. And then he was referring to Mahomes as Patty. I've never heard Mahomes be referred to as Patty. And my husband's a huge Chiefs fan. I'm like, do you know Saquon? He kept talking about Patty. And it took me 10 seconds to be like, oh, Patrick Mahomes. Who's Patty? So, that was kind of fun. And I loved that. Whatever that energy was that came out of Saquon in those moments, that was super fun. So that happened.
Speaking of energy, what's it like when you and Paul Latino talk? Because I think the rest of the room must not be able to get a word in.
Yeah, we want to talk 100 miles an hour and yell. So fun. I love my insider segments with Paul, and we do have to be okay, we almost have to map out what we're going to talk. And I'd be like, you don't have to say that. He's like, this and that, so that we don't be like, oh my God, it's Paul, I want to talk about this. And did you see that play? But the defense is playing better. And what's Patrick? So that would happen a lot if we did not take a deep breath and map out and talk on the phone and organize Giants insider segments. And when I have him on Sports Extra.
Another guy we had on very, very recently too.
Yeah. So great.
He's exceptional. And the both of you, tremendously high amounts of energy. And it always translates really well. And everything that you gave us here, I think it was a real mix of life advice, especially. A lot of great nuggets that helped you along your way throughout your entire career. You mentioned people like Bob Bernstein, fellow Maryland alum, Michelle Tafoya, Erin Andrews, Kim Jones. I would put you beside every single one of those women. I think what you do is absolutely tremendous. It is very evident that you have worked tremendously hard for everything that you have ever accomplished in your life. 7 New York Emmy Awards will also say that. Award-winning reporter Tina Cervasio was on our show. We really had a great, fun time doing this. Thank you so much for doing this with us. We always give our guests here the last word. So if there's anything you would like to share, promote, go right ahead. You gave us a really great breaking news tidbit. We're going to use Steve Nash on Sports Extra on Sunday. That's great. But the last words are all yours. Thank you again, Tina, for doing this. And you were truly terrific. And that's pretty much understating it too.
Oh, Joe, Nick, thank you for having me on. My last word is I'm commending you guys for having this podcast and your show. This is great. You created your own platform and you're creating your own followers, and they're going to be loyal and they're going to follow you wherever you go and wherever you bring this. And that's what makes sports great too, because we could sit here and chit chat about anything for hours, right? Because we're all fans. And whether it's players or games or memories, it really brings us together, even if we've never talked before. I mean, we could talk for another hour, and this, obviously I talked to your class, Nick, but so that's what I love about the world of sports. And I commend you guys for doing the show, and good luck. And it's awesome. Good for you guys.
Thanks, Tina. We appreciate it. And hopefully we're seeing you live from Citi Field for opening day, and of course covering the virtual World Series parade for the Mets. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens
Hopefully
there.
it's real by then. No. We want fans in the Canyon of Heroes.
We see. We'll see. That's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our special guest, Tina Cervasio, for my co-host, Joe Calabrese, I am Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.